The day the financial aid grants were dispersed to our bank accounts, I was just about to wire the money to my hospitalized grandpa. Suddenly, a strange voice echoed right inside my head. The transfer system said, "As long as someone consumes something I give them, I can quietly siphon away their money." Noah just got his financial aid drop today. Let's test it out on him. If the transfer actually works, I can finally use that cash to cop the designer suit I've been eyeing. That voice. It unmistakably belonged to my roommate, Blake. Frowning, I was just about to turn my head to look at him, when a chilled bottle of water was suddenly set down on my desk. Blake was smiling, his eyes curving with exaggerated warmth. "Hey, Noah. Thanks for grabbing my packages from the mailroom yesterday. Have some water on me." A second later, his giddy inner voice rang in my ears again. "Drink it. Come on, drink it. The second that water hits your stomach, your cash belongs to me." Looking at the poorly concealed greed and eager anticipation burning in his eyes, a sharp spike of fury ignited in my chest. Grant money was my grandpa's literal lifeline. Blake knew exactly what that money was meant for. With a completely blank expression, I reached out and took the bottle. "You want to drain my bank account? Fine. I will let you drain more than you could ever possibly stomach." His inner voice was practically buzzing with impatience. "Hurry up and twist the cap. You're killing me here. Just one sip, and that $5,000 is mine. I can finally secure those rare sneakers I've been obsessing over." Casually lifted my eyes to look at Blake. "Thanks, man. How much was it? I'll Venmo you." Blake waved his hands frantically, his smile turning sickeningly sweet. "Oh, come on. We're roommates. We live together. It's literally just a bottle of water. Don't insult me by bringing up money. Drink up, man. I just took it out of the mini fridge. It'll cool you right down. Venmo me? Are you an idiot? Long as you drink it, your entire $5,000 grant is mine." Trading a $2 bottle of water for $5,000 is the easiest scam of my life. I swept my gaze over him, taking in his entire outfit. He was wearing a brand new pair of limited edition sneakers today. Strapped to his wrist was the latest Apple Watch Ultra. His family's wealth eclipsed mine by miles. Yet he was intentionally targeting the exact money meant to keep my dying grandfather breathing. I set the water bottle near the edge of my desk, my voice entirely indifferent. "I'm actually not thirsty right now. I'll save it for later." The smile on Blake's face froze for a fraction of a second, but he quickly masked it, nodding enthusiastically. "Yeah, sure thing. Just leave it there. Drink it whenever." This guy is so difficult.
Why?
Why couldn't the stupid rule just be that he has to accept the item? To trigger the transfer?
Plus,
It takes a full 2 hours after consumption for the funds to actually hit my account. So slow, but at least. The system automatically wipes all the bank logs and leaves zero digital trace. That part is pretty sweet. I looked down at the plastic bottle resting on my desk, glacial chill flashing through my eyes. "You want to swallow my grandfather's medical funds? Then I will make sure you get a profound taste of what unchecked greed really costs." Right in front of Blake, I unzipped my backpack and shoved the bottle into the side pocket. "I have to head to my campus job.
see you.
Blake nodded along, playing the caring friend. "Don't work too hard, dude. Make sure you get some rest."
Perfect.
He took the water with him. As long as he takes a sip on his shift, that $5,000 is secured. The second the money clears, I am ordering those sneakers. I am so sick of watching other guys flex them on campus. I didn't bother looking back, tossing a vague hum of acknowledgement over my shoulder. As I pushed the dorm door open and walked out, I arrived at the university's main dining hall kitchen. The head chef, Maria, was already chatting away. "This bisque right here. This is the main event. A massive tech billionaire who's attending the alumni gala today specifically requested it, that he missed it from his college days. We used the most expensive premium ingredients for this batch. I'll save you a bowl later, so you can taste it." Maria smiled warmly at me while continuously stirring the massive
Stemming industrial pot.
I smiled back. "Thanks, Maria. That sounds amazing." Staring into that giant vat of rich, aromatic soup, corners of my mouth slowly curled upward. When no one was looking, I pulled the water bottle from my bag, unscrewed the cap, and poured every last drop directly into the boiling disc. With the water safely disposed of, I immediately threw myself into my kitchen duties. The moment I pushed my dorm room door open later that day, the first thing I saw was Blake sitting perfectly upright at his desk. His eyes locked onto me instantly. They were burning with an intense jittery urgency, like a predator that had been waiting hours for its prey to return. Before I could even take my backpack off, jumped up and practically sprinted over to me. He was holding an artisan pastry from a high-end bakery. his smile looking completely strained but desperate. Noah, you must be dead on your feet after working all morning. You have to be starving, right? I just bought this pastry. Grab a bite to hold you over. The very next second, his inner voice flooded my mind. I have no idea if he actually drank the water or not. He didn't. I need to force him to eat something else. I can't risk it.
Plus.
If this works, I might not just get his financial aid grant. I might be able to siphon whatever wages he earned from his shift. Today, too. Might as well drain every penny I can listening to his parasitic, bottomless calculations. A violent wave of disgust rose in my throat. I clamped down on my anger, letting a noticeable layer of frost enter my voice. I rejected him flat out. No thanks. I ate a staff meal in the kitchen before I left. I'm completely full. Blake's outstretched hand froze in midair. His overly eager smile collapsed instantly, and he awkwardly pulled the pastry back. He walked back to his desk in sullen silence. Tyler, our third roommate, was sitting on his bed. It always thought of me as an antisocial loser, always looking for a reason to pick a fight. Tyler immediately seized the opportunity to play the hero for Blake. His voice dripped with aggressive judgment. Noah, what is your actual problem? Blake is trying to be a decent guy. He gave you water this morning, and now he's offering you expensive food, because he knows you work hard. Why do you have to be such an ungrateful prick? I lifted my gaze to meet Tyler's, my voice perfectly level but carrying an unyielding weight. I am not being ungrateful. I already thanked him for the gesture. I told him I already ate, and I'm not hungry. Refusing food I don't want. Is that a crime now? Noah is so damn annoying. He's like a brick wall. He refuses to eat or drink anything I give him. If I knew it was going to be this much of a hassle, I would have picked someone else for the experiment. This is a massive waste of my time. Tyler wasn't ready to let it go. Crossed his arms and sneered, his tone growing even more mocking. You're just acting like you're above us. You never hang out with us. And you think just because you get top grades, you can look down on everyone else. Now you think you're too good to accept a simple favor? He paused, narrowing his eyes suspiciously. I bet you took that water he gave you this morning and threw it straight in the trash. I kept my eyes crystal clear, staring directly into his. My voice was calm and deliberate. Stop projecting your own toxic assumptions onto me. And for the record, I already drank the water. The moment those words left my mouth, Blake's dejected posture vanished. Pupils dilated with sheer electricity. He immediately forced his expression into a mask of friendly neutrality, stepping into play the generous peacemaker. All right, guys. Tyler, back off a bit. Noah didn't mean anything by it. He's probably just genuinely full. We all live in the same room. There's no reason to start a fight over a piece of bread. Yes. Actually worked. He drank the water, which means that $5,000 is basically sitting in my pocket. Once that money clears, I am ordering the sneakers instantly. Then I'll buy a bunch of premium snacks and drinks. For Tyler and the other guys in the hall. I'll drain all their monthly allowances too. If I pull this off a few more times, I can finally upgrade to that top-tier graphics card. This is literally perfect. I watched his hypocritical, smiling face in silence. My brief lunch break ended quickly. I grabbed my uniform and headed straight back to the dining hall
For the second half of my shift. By now.
The morning sessions of the university alumni gala had concluded. All the invited guests, the university board members, corporate titans, and wealthy donors were being ushered into the dining hall for the catered luncheon. The hall was packed to the brim, humming with energetic conversation. Taking advantage of a brief lull in the kitchen, I discreetly pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My balance read $0. The system theft had successfully activated. By 2 p.m., the lunch rush finally died down. Crowd began migrating over to the main auditorium for the keynote speeches from the distinguished alumni. I changed out of my uniform and followed the crowd, taking a seat near the back of the auditorium. Halfway through the event, an incredibly successful tech CEO was speaking passionately on stage. Suddenly, a few frantic whispers broke the quiet atmosphere. Wait, why is my Apple Pay declining? I'm trying to pay for my Amazon cart, but it says insufficient funds. A girl sitting in the row ahead of me was staring at her phone in total confusion, her voice a harsh whisper. Her friend immediately leaned in, her tone laced with rising panic. Me too. My parents wired me $2,000 for rent just yesterday. I tried to order coffee on the app, and my entire bank account is completely empty. What is going on? More and more panic murmurs began rippling through the rows of seating. Right at that moment, down in the front row, VIP section, a corporate tycoon in a bespoke tailored suit shot up from his seat. He was clutching his phone, his face completely drained of blood. His voice trembled violently, because he was sitting so close to the stage microphones. His panicked words echoed clearly across the entire auditorium, plunging the room into dead silence. "This is impossible. My entire portfolio, millions of dollars just vanished from my accounts." Those words hit the room like a bomb. The crowd erupted in absolute shock and uproar. After a second of stunned silence, the auditorium descended into total chaos. Screams of disbelief and frantic questioning echoed off the walls. "I just checked. My tuition savings are gone. I worked 3 part-time jobs for a year for that money. My rent money is completely gone." It wasn't just the students. Dozens of professors and faculty members were frantically jabbing at their phone screens, their faces turning ashen. "My entire paycheck from yesterday wiped clean," a professor yelled, his voice cracking with disbelief. Several university board members were huddled together, staring at a tablet in sheer horror. What is happening? The university's operational fund, millions of dollars allocated for this event, it's all gone. A wave of pure terror swept through the massive hall. The carefully organized keynote event completely disintegrated into a chaotic nightmare. I sat perfectly still amidst the screaming crowd, slowly turning my head to look at Blake. Just a few minutes ago, when my specific grant money had hit his account, he couldn't stop smiling. His eyes had been glowing with the thrill of stolen wealth. But right now, as he watched the digital numbers on his banking app skyrocket into the stratosphere, millions upon millions of dollars, flooding his account from every direction, the smug smile melted off his face. His skin turned a sickly, translucent white. What the hell is happening? Why is there so much money? Are all their missing funds? Are they all transferring directly to me? Blake slowly turned his head, his eyes wide with absolute, unadulterated terror, and locked eyes with me. I looked right back at his panic-stricken face, and I smiled. Just as the pandemonium in the auditorium reached a boiling point, the piercing wail of police sirens echoed from the campus courtyard. A squad of heavily armed police officers and federal agents stormed through the auditorium doors. "Which one of you is Blake? We received an emergency alert from the Federal Reserve regarding massive, fraudulent anomalies traced directly to your accounts." The heavy oak doors of the university's main auditorium did not just swing open. They slammed against the marble walls with a sound like a gunshot. The chaotic roar of the crowd, dozens of wealthy alumni, panicked professors, and students staring at their lifeless banking apps, died instantly. In its place rose the synchronized, heavy thud of combat boots. 6 federal agents in tactical vests, marked with the bold yellow insignia of the FBI's Cyber Division and Homeland Security, swept into the room. Behind them stood 2 local police officers, their hands hovering over their holstered sidearms. "Nobody move." The lead agent, a stern woman with steel-gray hair and a badge clipped to her belt, commanded. Her voice cut through the cavernous space, amplified by the sudden, terrified silence of the room. "Keep your hands where we can see them. We're looking for Blake Sterling." My eyes remained fixed on Blake. The contrast was spectacular. Just minutes ago, he had been basking in the silent glory of his stolen wealth, his posture radiating the smug confidence of a wolf among sheep. Now his knees buckled. His brand-new limited edition sneakers squeaked pathetically against the polished floor as he stumbled backward, knocking over a folding chair. "Double." Blake's voice was a high-pitched squeak. He tried to slide his phone into his pocket, but his hands were shaking so violently that the device slipped through his fingers, clattering loudly onto the floor. The screen flashed. Even from a few feet away, I could see the glowing, absurd string of digits on his banking app. The balance was no longer a modest $5,000. It was a shifting, monstrous digital tide of millions pulled directly from the accounts of billionaires, corporate entities, and the university's own endowment funds. "Blake Sterling," the lead agent said, stepping forward. Her eyes locked onto him like a hawk targeting a rabbit. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and suspected cyberterrorism against federal and institutional banking systems."
No.
"No, wait," Blake screamed, his face turning an unsightly shade of green.
He
Pointed a trembling, sweat-slicked finger directly at me. "It's not me.
It's
Him.
Noah.
He did something to the water. He took my bottle. He's the one who set me up." The agent didn't even blink. She glanced at me, taking in my faded, oversized thrift store jacket, my worn-out shoes, and the quiet, bewildered expression I had carefully painted onto my face. Sir, step back, the agent told me, her voice softening slightly, treating me as a potential hostage or a confused bystander. I don't understand, I stammered, pulling my phone from my pocket with trembling hands. I unlocked the screen and held it out for the officers to see. My banking app was open. The balance was a flat, devastating $0. He gave me a bottle of water this morning.
I didn't do anything.
My financial aid grant is
Gone.
I don't have anything left. The agent's gaze hardened as she looked back at Blake. You stole your roommate's financial aid? The money meant for his family's medical bills.
No.
You don't understand. The system. The voice in my head. Blake shrieked as two heavy-set officers grabbed his arms, forcing him to the ground. His face pressed hard against the dusty floorboards. It said if they consume it, the money transfers. He put the water in the soup. He made them eat it.
He's the
mastermind. He's completely delusional, a voice muttered from the crowd. It was Tyler. Our third roommate had slowly backed away from Blake, his face pale with fear. Tyler, who had spent the last several weeks laughing at Blake's jokes and treating me like dirt, was now sweating profusely. I have nothing to do with him. Tyler pleaded to an officer nearby. I just live in the same room.
I
Always thought Blake was sketchy. He was always bragging about getting rich. Quick. Shut up, Tyler. Shut up. Blake howled as the metal handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The cold iron seemed to finally shock him into reality. As the officers hauled him to his feet, Blake's eyes met mine. I didn't look away. I didn't look angry, nor did I look afraid. I simply let the corner of my mouth twitch upward into a microscopic, icy smile. One that only Blake could see. In that single, fleeting second, the realization hit him like a physical blow. He froze. The panicked, frantic screaming stopped, replaced by a deep, hollow horror. He realized that I had known. I had known about the voice, the transfer, and the rules. I had willingly walked into his trap, turned it inside out, and used his own greed to rope a noose around his neck. You, Blake whispered, his voice cracking. It was you. Move, the agent barked, shoving him forward. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as Blake was marched down the center aisle of the auditorium. The whispers followed him like a rising tide of venom.
The tech
billionaire, Marcus Vance, stood near the stage, his face dark with fury, dialing his attorneys on a backup phone. The university board members were already in a frantic huddle, realizing their operational funds had vanished into the personal checking account of a 19-year-old sophomore. I stood quietly in the back row, watching the doors swing shut behind them. The trap had sprung. But as I looked down at my phone, at that empty, mocking $0, the cold reality of my situation settled in. I had ruined Blake. But my grandfather's surgery was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and I had less than 18 hours to find $5,000 or the hospital would cancel the procedure. The atmosphere in the university dorm was suffocatingly tense. By evening, federal investigators had cordoned off our room with yellow police tape. I sat on a plastic chair in the hallway, my back against the wall. Tyler was pacing back and forth, chewing his fingernails down to the quick. Every time a student walked by and whispered, Tyler flinched. Noah, Tyler said suddenly, his voice shaking. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his usual arrogant sneer completely gone. You have to tell the feds. I didn't know anything, right? We're roommates. If they think I was in on it, my scholarship is gone. My parents will kill me. I didn't look up from my lap. You were very quick to defend him this morning, Tyler. You called me an ungrateful prick for refusing his food. I was just trying to keep the peace. Tyler pleaded, stepping closer, his hands raised in a defensive gesture. I didn't know he was some kind of international cyber thief.
Please, Noah.
If they interview you again, just tell them I'm innocent. I will tell them the truth, I said quietly, whatever that may be. Tyler opened his mouth to argue, but the elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open. Two men in expensive, tailored charcoal suits stepped out. They didn't look like federal agents. They looked like corporate cleanup crews. Behind them walked a middle-aged man with sharp, aristocratic features, his hair slicked back with silver at the temples. It was Richard Sterling, Blake's father. Richard was a prominent real estate mogul in the state, a man whose wealth was built on predatory land acquisitions and high society political connections. Usually, his face was plastered on local business magazines, wearing a broad, conquering smile. Today, his expression was a mask of cold, controlled fury. He marched down the hallway, ignoring the stares of the other students.
His eyes.
Swept over the police tape on the door, then landed on Tyler and finally on me. "Are you Noah?" Richard asked, his voice deep, carrying the heavy authority of a man used to buying his way out of any room. "I am," I said, standing up slowly. Richard gestured to one of his suits, who immediately stepped forward and handed me a business card. "My name is Richard Sterling. I am Blake's father. I need to speak with you privately." "The feds told us not to discuss the case with anyone," Tyler chimed in, trying to sound helpful. Richard didn't even look at him. He simply raised a hand and the second suit step shifted, physically blocking Tyler from the conversation. "Get lost, kid," the suit murmured. Tyler shrank back and quickly bolted down the hallway toward the exit. "There's a cafe across the street," Richard said, his eyes scanning my cheap clothes. "Let's walk. I believe we have a mutual interest in resolving this misunderstanding." "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my voice neutral, deliberately playing the role of the stubborn, grieving victim. "My grandfather is in the ICU. The money your son stole was my only way to pay
For his treatment.
I have to go to the hospital." Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, a calculator running behind his irises.
Exactly.
"Which is why you will walk with me, because right now I am the only person who can write a check to save your grandfather's life." I let a flicker of hesitation cross my face, just enough to let him think he was in control. "Fine," I murmured. "Let's talk." The cafe across the street was nearly empty, washed in the dim, yellow light of a rainy evening. Richard Sterling sat across from me, his hands folded over a leather-bound folder. He hadn't touched his espresso. "Let's not waste time, Noah," Richard began, leaning forward. "My attorneys have already briefed me on the situation. The Federal Reserve and the Department of Justice are treating this as an unprecedented cyber attack. They are claiming Blake used an untraceable, high-frequency algorithm to siphon funds directly from the banking core." He paused, a dark scowl crossing his face. "But I know my son. Blake is a fool. He spends his time buying sneakers and playing video games. He doesn't have the intellect to design a system that can bypass federal security protocols without leaving a single digital trace." "The feds seem to think otherwise," I noted dryly. "The money is in his account." "Because he was set up," Richard snapped, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "My legal team suspects he was targeted by a highly sophisticated group of hackers who used him as a mule, a distraction to test a new exploit. And you were his roommate. You were there when the anomaly occurred." I took a slow sip of my water. "I was working my shift at the dining hall, Mr. Sterling. I have 30 witnesses who can place me in the kitchen." "I know," Richard said, opening the folder. He slid a document across the table. It was a printed copy of my grandfather's medical billing statement, showing a balance of $4,800 due by 8 a.m. tomorrow, with an estimated $50,000 for the subsequent post-operative care. "You are a scholarship student," Richard said, his tone dripping with a mixture of pity and leverage. "Your family has nothing. If that money isn't paid, the hospital will discharge your grandfather to a long-term care facility. We both know what that means for a man in his condition." He slid a second piece of paper forward. It was a cashier's check, pre-signed. The amount was $100,000. "This is a clean, private draft from an offshore account," Richard said, his voice steady. "The feds cannot touch it. It has no connection to Blake's frozen assets. It is yours. You can pay the hospital tonight, and you will have more than enough left over to finish your degree without ever working another shift in that kitchen." I stared at the check. The paper felt heavy, carrying the scent of old, corrupt
Money.
"And what do you want in exchange?"
I asked. "A simple statement," Richard said.
He tapped a document inside the folder.
"My
"Lawyers have drafted an affidavit. It states that Blake has been suffering from severe psychological episodes, hearing voices, and exhibiting erratic behavior for months. It states that you saw him interacting with suspicious online forums and that you believe he was coerced or manipulated by an external entity." He leaned in closer, his eyes cold. "If we can prove Blake is mentally incompetent and was a victim of psychological manipulation by a foreign hacking syndicate, we can get him out of a federal supermax and into a private sanitarium. From there, I can handle the rest." I looked at the affidavit. If I signed this, I would be helping Blake escape the worst of his punishment. He would be placed in a luxury clinic, shielded by his father's wealth, while the world blamed some faceless, non-existent hacker.
Group.
But if I didn't sign it, my grandfather would die. Richard watched me, a smug, victorious grin beginning to form at the edge of his
Mouth.
He thought he had me. He thought a poor, desperate kid like me would jump at the chance to sell his soul for 100 grand. What Richard didn't know was that the supernatural system Blake possessed had a fatal flaw, one that Blake had let slip in his frantic thoughts earlier today. The system automatically wipes all the bank logs and leaves zero digital trace. That part is pretty sweet. The system wiped the digital traces, but it didn't wipe physical reality.
It
didn't wipe the physical evidence of what had actually entered the stomachs of those billionaires. I looked up at Richard, my expression perfectly calm. 100,000 is a lot of money, Mr. Sterling, I said, picking up the
pen.
But I think you're underestimating the severity of your son's situation. What do you mean? Richard's smile faltered. Your lawyers think this is a cyber attack, I said, leaning back, the pen balancing between my fingers. But the FBI is already testing the food and drink from the alumni gala. Do you know why? Richard's face stiffened. Why would they do that? Because Marcus Vance, the tech billionaire, didn't just lose his money. I lied, smoothly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He had a severe allergic reaction during the luncheon. The FBI seized the kitchen logs. They found out that the special bisque he ate contained traces of an unlisted substance, a specific brand of bottled water that was poured into the vat. I watched Richard's pupils dilate. And do you know whose room that bottled water came from? I continued, letting a cold, sharp edge enter my voice. They found the empty bottle in the kitchen.
Recycling bin.
It had Blake's fingerprints all over it. The feds aren't just looking at wire fraud anymore, Mr. Sterling. They are looking at chemical poisoning of a high-profile federal donor. This was a bluff, of course. The feds didn't know about the water yet.
But
Richard didn't know that. To a high-society mogul, the threat of a chemical poisoning charge on top of a federal cyber heist was a death sentence for his family's empire. Richard's hand began to twitch. That's impossible. Blake wouldn't poison anyone. Blake is a greedy idiot, I said, sliding the affidavit back to him and signed. And right now your $100,000 is an insult. If I sign this fake affidavit and the FBI proves Blake physically introduced a contaminant into the food supply, I become an accessory to a federal terror charge. I stood up, pulling my backpack over my shoulder. Keep your check, Mr. Sterling, I said, turning to walk away. I'll take my chances with the hospital. At least I won't spend the next 20 years in a federal cell. Wait. Richard's voice was no longer that of a commanding mogul. It was the desperate, panicked bark of a man watching his lineage crumble into ash. He stood up, knocking his chair back. Name your price, Noah, Richard hissed, his face red, sweat breaking out along
his hairline.
Name your damn price. I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I let him stew in his own terror. For 5 long seconds. When I finally turned, my face was a mask of cold, unyielding iron. 500,000, I said, in cash, delivered to my grandfather's hospital account within the hour. And I want a signed confession from Blake, admitting that he stole my financial aid money and tried to frame me. Richard stared at me, his chest heaving. A written confession? That would destroy his defense.
No, irreplaceably.
A confession of petty theft of my $5,000 keeps me out of the cyber fraud narrative. It proves I had a personal grievance with him, which explains why I refused his food. It separates me from his cyber terrorism entirely. If you want my silence on the water bottle, you give me the leverage to clear my own name. Richard's jaw clenched so hard I could hear the bone grind. He looked at me, realizing that this 19-year-old kid had just completely outmaneuvered him, his lawyers, and his millions. He had no choice. Fine, Richard spat, pulling out his phone. It will be done. 2 hours later, I stood in the quiet, sterile hallway of the hospital's intensive care unit. The red payment overdue flashing on the computer terminal at the reception desk had been replaced by a bright, soothing green status. Paid in full, trust. Fund activated. The surgeon, a tired-looking man in blue scrubs, walked out of my grandfather's room, pulling off his mask. He smiled warmly when he saw me.
Noah,
you're a miracle worker. The hospital trust just received a wire transfer of $500,000.
$200.
The outstanding balance is cleared, and we've already booked the specialist from Boston for the morning surgery. Your grandfather is going to be fine. I felt a massive, heavy weight lift from my chest. Thank you, doctor.
Thank
You. After the doctor left, I walked into the room. My grandfather was asleep, his chest rising and falling to the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor.
I
Sat beside his bed, holding his rough, calloused hand. I got it back, Grandpa. I whispered, a single tear slipping down my cheek.
I
Got it back, and then some. But my work wasn't finished. The next morning, I received a call from Special Agent Carter of the FBI.
She
Wanted me to come down to the federal holding facility in the city. Blake had requested to see me. The detention center was a bleak, concrete fortress on the edge of the industrial district. I was escorted through 3 sets of heavy steel doors into a small, windowless interrogation room. A thick sheet of plexiglass separated the room in half. After a few minutes, a door on the other side opened. Blake was led in by a guard. He looked unrecognizable. The expensive designer clothes had been replaced by a coarse, oversized orange jumpsuit.
The
limited edition sneakers were gone, replaced by cheap rubber slide-ons. His hair was greasy, and his eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark, hollow circles. He sat down heavily, his hands shaking as he picked up the gray plastic telephone receiver. I sat down on my side and picked up mine. Noah, Blake whispered, his voice dry and raspy. You have to help me.
please
Tell them about the hacker group. My dad said you were going to sign the
paper.
I signed the paper, Blake. I said, my voice perfectly level. And your dad paid for my grandfather's surgery. The transaction is complete. Blake's eyes flared with a sudden, desperate hope. Then I can get out? They'll transfer me to a hospital? This place. Noah, you don't understand.
The
noise, the voices, they're so loud here. There are so many people, and I can hear. I can hear everything. I frowned slightly, leaning closer to the glass. What do you mean, Blake? The system, Blake whimpered, pressing his forehead against the glass.
It's
Gone wrong. It's totally broken. He began to ramble, his words pouring out in a frantic, terrifying torrent. When I was in the auditorium, when all that money started flooding in, the system kept screaming at me. Transfer successful. Transfer successful.
It
didn't stop. It was siphoning millions from every single person who ate that soup. But because the feds froze my account immediately, the money is stuck in a digital limbo. Blake gripped the receiver so hard his knuckles turned white. The system, it has a penalty rule, Noah. I didn't know. I didn't read the fine print in my head. If the siphon funds are frozen or confiscated by a third party before they are consumed or spent by the host, the system treats it as a debt. I felt a cold thrill run down my spine.
a debt.
Yes, Blake cried, tears streaming down his face. The system is trying to pay back the lost funds by siphoning me. It's siphoning my life force, my energy, my mind. Every hour that passes, I feel like I'm starving. I feel like my brain is melting. I can hear the system clawing at the inside of my skull, trying to drag the money out of my bones. I stared at him through the glass. The sheer, cosmic irony of it was beautiful. His supernatural system, his tool of ultimate greed, had turned into a parasitic
Beast.
because he had stolen millions from the wealthiest people in the state, and because those millions were now locked in a federal vault, his system was trying to extract the value from Blake himself. Noah, Blake begged, his eyes wide and pleading.
Please.
Give me something.
Just a piece of bread.
A piece of gum. Anything. The system rule, if I eat something you give me, and I have a debt, it might reset. Please, I'm begging you. Just slip a stick of gum through the tray.
Please.
I looked down at the small metal slot at the bottom of the plexiglass partition, meant for transferring documents. I reached into my pocket. Blake watched my hand with a frantic, animalistic hunger. His tongue darted out to wet his dry lips. He was completely at my mercy. I pulled my hand out of my pocket. It was empty. I rested my palm flat against the glass, looking directly into his terrified, hollow eyes. I don't have anything for you, Blake, I said quietly. No.
Please.
Just a drop of water. Anything. Blake screamed, banging his fists against the glass. The guard in the corner immediately stepped forward, his hand on his baton. You have to. You're the one who put the water in the soup. You're the one who did this to me. You did this to yourself, Blake, I said, my voice echoing with a calm, absolute finality. You tried to steal $5,000 from a dying old
man.
You tried to ruin my life for a pair of sneakers. You wanted to see what unchecked greed looked like. I stood up, letting the telephone receiver hang from its metal cord. Now, I whispered, you get to taste it.
No. Noah.
Come back. Noah. Blake's screams were cut off as the guard tackled him to the floor, pinning his arms behind his back. He thrashed and struggled, his face pressed against the cold concrete, his eyes locked on me until the heavy steel door slid shut, blocking him from my sight. 2 weeks later, the campus had mostly returned to normal, though the shadows of the alumni gala incident still lingered in the whispers of the students. The Federal Reserve had eventually classified the event as a highly sophisticated, one-time routing anomaly caused by a glitch in a regional server update. The lost funds were quietly restored to the alumni and the university's accounts. Blake's family, ruined by the legal fees and the massive scandal, faded from the public eye. Richard Sterling was forced to sell off a significant portion of his real estate portfolio to pay the federal fines. Blake himself was transferred to a maximum security psychiatric facility in upstate New York, officially diagnosed with severe, drug-induced schizophrenia. Tyler had moved out of our dorm room, unable to handle the social stigma of being Blake's former best friend. I had the entire room to myself now. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining through the window, casting long, warm streaks of light across my desk. I sat at my computer, watching a live stream of my grandfather's physical therapy session. He was standing up, leaning on a walker, but his face was bright with a strong, healthy smile. The nurses were hovering nearby, treating him with the utmost care, a privilege bought and paid for by the Sterling family trust. My phone buzzed on the desk. I picked it up. It was a notification from my banking app. I opened it, expecting to see the remaining balance of the trust fund. But as the screen loaded, my breath hitched. The balance was not what it was yesterday. Beside the standard savings account, a new, hidden ledger had appeared on the screen. The text was not in the standard blue font of the bank. It was written in a sharp, glowing crimson digital script. Ledger, siphoned assets, inactive, host status, terminated, Blake Sterling, new. Host detected, Noah transfer system, ready. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The system hadn't died with Blake's mind. It had recognized the true victor. It had recognized the person who had actually controlled the flow of the wealth. I slowly leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the bustling campus. Below, students were walking by, laughing, carrying expensive coffees and designer bags. The glowing red text on my phone pulsed gently, waiting for my command. As long as someone consumes something you give them. I let out a long, slow breath, a quiet, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. I closed the app, locked my phone, and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't need the system. Not today, and perhaps not tomorrow. But as I stood up and walked out into the warm afternoon sun, I knew one thing for certain. The world was full of wolves. But from now on, I would never be the sheep.